was the problems that are faced by the Fund of Developing Skills in Yemen, and the problems of developing the skills of the education staff. And she has set a program to accommodate the graduates of PhD programs in planning and administration. The second paper by Mr. Anas Al-Qadi, and he is a socio-political analyst in the Yemeni Center for Strategic Studies. He has a license in law from Taiz University, and he has a license from the media coverage in the Yemeni TV, and he authored the book From Unity to the Revolution, the Yemeni Republic in 25 years from tyranny to international hegemony. The third paper will be by Dr. Abdul Rahman Ahmad Al-Mukhtar. Dr. Abdul Rahman is the professor of public law, and he was an advisor in Al-Hudaydah University in Yemen, the assistant professor in law, and he has a degree in public law from Cairo University 2007, and an MA in public law as well from the law department in Babel University in Iraq, and in 2012, and he has a degree from Sana'a University in 1996. He has a number of books and publications that he has written, including the general principles of local administration and its applications in the Yemeni Republic, the general principles of the constitutional law. All of these are academic books, and there is also the local authority in the Yemeni Republic, the conflicts in the Yemeni judiciary, administering or managing the local affairs, the constitutional systems and constitutional affairs, and he was member of the and he wrote also about the constitutional drafting in 2017, the self-destructive program, and he was an advisor of legal issues in 2017-2018, and he was a member of the High Revolutionary Committee and a member of the constitutional drafting. Before the Arab Spring, he was a member of a number of boards and academic commissions, including the Constitutional Committee in the Al-Hudaydah University. The fourth speaker about the lessons learned and the future prospects, Dr. Rumaiha, and he is an assistant professor in the Department of Islamic Studies in the Humanities in Al-Marifa and then Iqra University. He has a PhD in Islamic thought from Aden University in 2013, and now he is the dean of the school law in Al-Marifa University. He has a number of publications in peer-reviewed journal in the terms of ethics and critique and the relation between the different religions. And he has another publication called From the Crisis Awareness to the Awareness of a Crisis, and he has a study about the Houthis and knowing oneself and the identity, and he has other books that are under printing, including the theology and the humanity of a human being in Islam. After these four papers, we will have a comment by Dr. Al-Hudayli Al-Mansar. He is a teacher of French literature in the French University in Tunisia, and he is the head of Jalaluddin Rumi Center for Civilization Revival and Thought Revival in Tunisia. Welcome all. Each speaker will have 25 to 30 minutes, but we hope that you can keep track of time so we can give space for the comments. And we will start with Dr. Fathiya Alai. The floor is yours. Hello, peace be upon you. First, I would like to thank SIGA for this opportunity, especially our Professor Sami Al-Aryan. And I would like to thank the Center of Strategic Policies in Yemen. And in my paper, I will speak about Ansarullah movement towards the state building in Yemen. This paper came from the idea of the martyr Badruddin al-Houthi, God bless him, because we learned from him a lot about the state building, and his vision changed or has different issues about the basic principles about the state building. And this paper depended on his vision to build the Yemeni state, learning from the lessons and the lectures that he gave. And the objective of the goal is to show the vision of Ansarullah to build to the state building in Yemen. The vision of the leader came from Quran and the Sunnah, and it was linked with the Islamic Sharia. Some of them are linked or in line with the basic principles of the politics in modern study, and some of them are different. They are broad lines and they are general issues, and we have three main principles, which are the Ummah, the methodology, and the leadership. We're going to speak about each one of these principles separately to elaborate that. The main that may be issues of this paper, I'm going to talk about 4 points. First of all, the principles of the state building and the ideology or in the thoughts of Badruddin al-Houthi, the relation of these principles together, and then the principles and the national vision to build a new Yemeni state from 2019 to 2030. And finally, I will conclude with the conclusions and the lessons learned from the paper. The principles of building of the state building, the modern state building, and the thoughts of the leader who was martyred. First of all, talking about the Ummah, the leader talked about the notion of the Ummah in a number of his lectures, and he talked about the notion of the Ummah that it is groups of peoples that might be wide or narrow according to the spread. They are ruled by a number of God ordained rules. Of course, this notion is wider than the notion that is present, or the concept that is present in the political science right now. It includes a number of economic and social aspects. This concept was further developed under sub-headings in order to understand each of those concepts under this principle, which is the principle of Ummah. The leader talked about the situation of the Ummah, and he said that the situation of the Ummah is very bad, and it is under the mercy of the Christians and Jews, although the God or the Almighty sent to the Arabs an Arab prophet that can rule them. God the Almighty wants from this Ummah to be dignified and proud of itself, but we see that this Ummah is under the ruling of the Jews and the Christians, who are, as mentioned by Allah, they were put under humiliation. The leader says that the problem of the Ummah, or what we see in the Ummah, because they are not committed to Quran anyway, and they have a wrong interpretation, so it lost its position, and it's lost its position as the highest nation amongst the other nations in the world. Based on that, he puts the role of the Ummah as well. He talked about the issue of the taking care of Ummah by the ruler, and taking care of the wealth education under the Islamic principles, providing justice to the disfortunate people and the vulnerable people. And he also shows the importance of committing to the Quran and the Sunnah. He also talked about the importance of the fact that rulers should not be under the control of the foreigners, because that will make them lose their independence. The leader also stated the role of the state building and the Ummah building, and he said that each role is represented in a number of tasks or functions, and each task will lead to that goal, the goal of the Ummah. And he talked also about the importance of the self-agency of the Ummah, because this will lead to the independence and in decision making and in other issues. He talked about self-sufficiency and
لا
that
تأتى إلا بتوافر القوة الاقتصادية.
Ummah is able to rely on strength. The Ummah that cannot defend itself and protect its territories,
ستكون
if
ضعيفة.
it is weak economically, then for sure it will be weak on the other aspects. How can we face the enemies and apply or perform jihad under economic weakness if we don't have economic strength? So the leader
وأيضا
said
وأكد على الاعتماد على النفس باعتبار ذلك أحد الركائز الأساسية لبناء الدولة المستقلة. أيضا بين في ذلك حث
rely on other countries in terms of the food security or national security of the base of the state. He talked about the importance of performing jihad and sacrificing the money and the spirit for the sake of Allah. And he talked about the role of the ulama or the scholars for that end. And talking about jihad today is not welcome. On the contrary, we see that the West is present everywhere. They have military presence in the seas and in other countries. They go as conquerors and they control the territories. And Allah ordained us to fight them. Allah the Almighty wanted the Ummah of Quran to perform jihad and the responsibility of jihad on earth until the religion is reaches all corners of the earth. The other principle now, which is the pioneering or leadership. In the lectures of the leading martyr, he talked about leadership, and he said that the leadership that Allah recommended is for making the or performing the orders of Allah and the Sunnah. And he said that the leadership in the Quran has the principles and the conditions as put in the Quran. When the Ummah leads the people on the earth, it means that they put all people under one banner, and he puts some principles for the leading, similar to the principles of the state building. And because when the Ummah leads in the country, so it will become independent and nobody will control its decisions. The third principle, which is important, and the leader, the martyred leader mentioned, which is the methodology. He said, or he provided his vision about knowing the appropriate
والمنهج طبعا هو يعتبر نظام الدولة الذي تدير
the Quran and Sunnah. In this methodology, the leadership will be for the people according to the Quran and Sunnah. He said that the methodology is represented by Allah,
وكل الجوانب الأخرى. وقد تضمنت دروس الشهيد
which provides the organizational aspects, legislative aspect, and the lectures and lessons of the martyr leader had an analysis of the reality and reforming this reality based on according to the correct things. And he calls on everybody to review what they all the heritage that they have and to restore or to restore the reality based on Quran and the reality. He says that the
وصلاح الحياة والنجاة في الآخرة، لأن اتساع القرآن في تشريعاته في الحياة شامل.
Method not be appropriate without without Quran and without having that rule. And Quran is the law of life by which people will be able to live their life correctly. He also reiterated on following the scholars because they are the leading models after the prophets. And he stated that it is important to select the ulama or the scholars that should be followed in order to be on the right track and to reach the purposes that we want, because sometimes the scholars will have differences on fixed issues. He also talked about the sources of knowledge and including, most importantly, the academic research. He focused on that as a key issue and a key starting point that will help to get into a lot of sciences in the different aspects of life. Unfortunately, our enemies or our adversaries reached that level more than we did, and for building the state correctly, we need to take care of the academic research or scientific research, because it is the best way to build the state. After these three
مترابطة
the ummah, the leadership, and the methodology, we find that these three principles complement each other, and we cannot have any one of them separate from the other. So these principles of the state building and the thoughts of the martyred leader and its relation with the project of the modern state. Of course, we should have started in this topic. In addition to that, there should be a military front and institutional work. After 3 years of the American-Saudi aggression on our country, against our country, it was necessary to have institutional activity. So Saleh al-Samad, the martyred president, put the slogan, "One hand protects and the other hand builds." So after his martyrdom, he wanted to translate this slogan into a national vision that was adopted in 2019 to be a vision until 2030 as a national vision that will restore the vision for the modern state in Yemen, and that will lead to the development which will help to get into similar aspects or similar status of other countries.
واعتمدت 25 مستهدفا رئيسيا.
Pipeline of the Millennium Goal until 2030, and it's adopted. This vision adopted the 25 of those goals that will be achieved by the year 2030. These goals were broken down into objectives and the strategic purposes. These goals and objectives were put or broken down into 3 phases. The first one from 2019 to 2020, and this is over. The second one is from 2020 to 2025, and the third is from 2025 to 2030. The vision looks forward to development in all aspects: economic development, reaching self-reliance, and making use of the resources that are available in Yemen, especially that Yemen has a lot of resources that are not available in other countries of the world, and to be liberated from the economic hegemony in order to get rid of the political control. Of course, finishing the first part of the national plan, which was translated into a strategic vision in the year 2019 to 2020, and this plan was under the supervision of the national plan, and it achieved good results despite the aggression and the siege upon Yemen. However, the institutions are making progress in most files, including the economic one. Yemen managed to function or to restore the function of the institutions and to get back to the economic situation before the aggression, and they moved the central bank from Sana'a to Aden. In general, the national plan talks about building the new principles of the modern state at all levels. We can talk about that in general in the following. Improving the constitutional basics and keys of the modern state building in Yemen according to a constitution that will be put to referendum and that will be adopted by the resolution of the higher constitutional court. Of course, this will take into consideration the national interests through a dialogue that will be conducted internally and outside Yemen. Rebuilding the 3 authorities of the country and their role in building the modern state through the new legislations that will build the institutions of these 3 authorities. that will allow them to function properly. And this leads to having the effective or a functional mechanism that will lead to a diverse economy. Also, having a sustainable economy that will allow to improve the national economy, that will lead to recovery and development and resilience through increasing the local GDP or the national GDP. Also, one of the goals of building this the modern state, overcoming the results of the conflicts of the past years and rebuilding society. We see that through the goals that I mentioned, they represent part of the methodology that was followed by the martyred leader, and it shows that the people and the Ummah are the source of the authority, and an interest in the economic aspect is central in this plan for the sustainability and independence of Yemen for self-reliance and depending on the resources that are present in Yemen, and to follow the appropriate or the correct Quranic methodology. Based on that, the paper, this research paper, concludes with the following lessons learned and conclusions. Hussein Badruddin al-Houthi, may God bless him, adopted the principles that reads the reality and that are based on the Quran. It says that the Quran is the basic starting point of the Ummah, and that it is comprehensive and it goes beyond time and space. Leadership should be under the principles, and in the stories of Quran there is a comprehensive methodology for learning lessons and for the rules to be extracted from them. Quran and Sunnah is plausible and appropriate to be implemented everywhere, and the principles that are in Quran are fixed and they call for improvement in all levels. The project of Quran can get the Ummah from the crisis that it is in, if there is a willingness that will hold this Quranic methodology, because it is a practical issue. The wrong leadership that is not following the Quran should be eliminated. The Ummah should take media, journalists and writers in order to raise awareness in the community and to use these tools for its purposes, and to correct the wrong ideas that are present in the Ummah, and to get rid of the hegemony over the Ummah. Also, one of the lessons learned is to build an independent Ummah or country that can work without hegemony of outsiders or the control of outsiders, and we need to depend on our resources based on our wealth and agriculture. Interest in the Quranic methodology and following the course of Quran. Also, working on unifying the Ummah and get rid of the wrongful culture that is present in amongst the ranks of the Ummah. Always reviving the correct methodology that is present in Quran and Sunnah, and trying to select the leadership of the country based on those principles that are present in Quran and Sunnah, and that can meet these ends. Thank you very much. That's all from my paper. Thank you very much, Dr. Fathiya, for your presentation, and I will try to summarize what you have said. Dr. Fathiya said that the paper she presents trying to answer the question that was asked to her, which is knowing the vision of Ansarullah towards the state building in Yemen. And to do that, she went back to the lectures of the leader Hussein Badruddin al-Houthi in order to extract this vision that is adopted by the movement and for the state. And it's linked it with the national plan or the national vision that was issued by the authority for the years 2019 until 2030 for building the modern Yemeni state. And she says that there are three principles for this vision, which is the Ummah, the methodology, and the leadership, and she talked about each one of these principles. And she said that the Quran, the Holy Quran, is the starting point for the Ummah, and that we need to improve the aspects of Ummah at all levels, and selecting the appropriate ulama or scholars in the Ummah who can follow this methodology is the good leadership. And she ended up with the conclusions and recommendations that we are going to mention them when at the time. She said that the objectives of her research is to know the objectives of Ansarullah for the state building, and analyzing this vision that was formulated by Sayyid al-Houthi or Mr. al-Houthi for the state building, and knowing the main principles or the main pillars for the state building, and linking it with the national plan for the years 2019 to 2030. And she finished with the recommendations and the conclusions. Talking about the first principle, which is the Ummah, she said that the concept of Ummah is or represent the groups of people that can grow wider or grow narrower based on the expansion of the expansion of the concept under which follows the holy track, and this is different from, or it is wider than the concept that is mentioned in the political sciences or the modern political sciences. However, she says that under this broad headline, there are subheadings that can be followed. First of all, is the ruler and should take care of the Ummah and the well upbringing of the society according to Quran and Sunnah. All of these points are very important and should be taken into consideration. In addition, the role of Ummah should be identified in terms of following the Quran and Sunnah and paying justice or instilling justice in community and spreading the da'wah. And the Ummah in the current or in the modern history is very bad, because most of the Arab or Islamic country are under the control of the enemies of the Ummah, and accordingly there are crises that are linked directly with the relation of the Ummah or the Muslims with Allah the Almighty, and that they are under control of their enemies. And she provided some examples. The third subheading was the self-sufficiency. She said the correct route for the Ummah is self-reliance, and that the Ummah can face its enemy if it has self-sufficiency, and this can only happen through economic independence, and the Ummah can only cannot defend itself if it is economically weak. And then she said that under the fourth subheading about the Quran, the methodology of Quran and following that method, and the fifth one was the importance of jihad, sacrificing the money and spirit in order to apply this issue. And she talked about the role of ulama for jihad, and that this would be one of the aspects of education for Muslims. The second principle after Ummah is leadership. She said that leadership was a key issue in this vision, and she mentioned some verses from Quran, and she said that Allah the Almighty gave the Ummah some conditions for this leadership. Some of these conditions is that the leader is a captain of a ship that should lead his people to the safety, and he should be a role model, and that Quran leads to this leadership, and this leadership should be in line with the road to Allah. Then she talked about the methodology, and she said that the vision should be extracted from Quran, because Quran is the guide for the appropriate and correct methodology or the correct road, and that Allah gave that road for people everywhere in all aspects, and all of that is present in Quran. And she says that everyone should revive or review what they all the heritage that they have, and to recorrect or revisit their understanding of the Quran under the slogan "One eye on the reality and one eye on the Quran." She says also that the methodology of the state and organizing the relation between the people should be extracted from Quran and Sunnah. And she said that she has studied these lectures, and she came up with a number of issues based on the main principles that should be taken into consideration, which is the correcting the knowledge, the following the methodology of Quran, the good selection of ulama, and the academic and scientific research. And there are different lectures about the importance of that and the benefiting from the media and the historic anecdotes. And the fourth point is the relation between these three principles, i.e. the Ummah, the methodology, and the leadership. She said that the relation between them is complementary, and you cannot talk about one of them separately from others, and each one of them are organically related to the other. And Quran is the one that they should be ready, and they should follow that. Then she talked about the building of the Ummah and the as part of the national plan that was put in the strategy, the national strategy for the years 2019 to 2030. And she said that it was broken down into three phases. The first one was ended in 2020, the second from 2020 to 2025, and the third is from 2025 to 2030. And she said that in general, this vision focused on the state building on purposes, and those purposes or objectives were about reaching comprehensive national reconciliation through dialogue, rebuilding the three authorities of the state to be functional, improving a mechanism and functional mechanism that will lead to economic development and making a sustainable economic development, and boosting social reconciliation to end any tribal or societal conflict. She concluded that with the conclusions. She said that the conclusions from this study is, first, is that the leadership should be under the good selection of leaders, and that the Quran is the key point or the key starting point. And that it should start with the macro level, and then it gets into the micro level in order to be complemented, because the Quranic project is capable of getting this Ummah out of its crises, and that the crisis of the Ummah is because of the wrong interpretation of what we have, and that the importance of selecting the ulama and who are the role models of the people should be corrected, and people and the leaders of the Ummah should use the mass media for raising awareness and to get rid of the imperialist movement or expansion, building a state that is viable and giving attention to scientific research, following Islamic Sharia, self-reliance, taking care of the Quranic methodology in order to build this state. Thank you very much, Dr. Fathia, for your presentation. Now we move to the second paper, Mr. Al-Qadi, to talk about the principles and the performance of
Ansarullah movement. In the name of God, the merciful, the compassionate, I would like to thank you, Dr. Sami, head of SIGA, for this invitation. In the name of God, the merciful, the compassionate, I would like first of all to introduce Ansarullah as a movement before speaking about their experience, which is still dynamic. Ansarullah is a Renaissance movement that came from the cultural situation in the unified Yemen, and after the 9/11 events, the cultural activity in Ansarullah movement started in 2002, and it was normal because it was just cultural. But after the war on this movement in 2004, it started to emerge as an active movement in Yemen, and it started to introduce itself and move on certain tracks and be treated as an actor, not just a cultural actor. In terms of social character, it's mainly a rural movement, and including the fact that it has a madhab association, and their constituency is mainly in the Zaydi environment without a restriction to this madhab, but also in Ismaili, Sufi, and Shafi'i madhabs as well. It was being formed when the Arab Spring started, and it contributed to the popular uprising in 2011, which constituted its first civil contribution, as its activities and contributions before that were military, because their authority waged unjust war against them. With the beginning of the National Dialogue Conference in 2013, they engaged in an expansive political engagement or contribution and program-based political work, and it is in this phase, this comprehensive national dialogue phase, in which Ansarullah initiated work plans. So in comparison to their community, they introduced an action plan or a political program which was quite advanced in comparison with their surroundings or the other actors, and they were keen on introducing themselves in this progressive manner, an advanced manner to the other actors. Before that, their character was a bit ambiguous, and other actors in Yemen did not know Ansarullah very well and were affected by the propaganda of the former authority. Ansarullah's practice in policy and politics in 2014 gave it some experience in this regard, so they needed to gather alongside them all the public powers and the constituencies which were affected by the injustice of the former authority. However, the most important experience, in my point of view, was their contribution and participation in leading the revolutionary phase and the facing the aggression, in which Ansarullah had to work on the different Yemeni fronts and Yemeni components, which required mobilization of all components of Yemeni. So this confrontation with the aggression necessitated the mobilization of a more expansive constituency than was needed for the revolution, for example. Their relation with the components of the Yemeni community, which have different madhabs, different tribes, civil society communities, arts and cultural strata, and political elites. To start with their performance in their relations with other religious madhabs, the Yemeni community is quite diverse, and it is a diversity within a historical unity and coexistence between those different components. So all of those madhabs who had former states and former Dawa scholars were Zaydi, Shafi'i, Ismaili, and the different Sufi schools of thought. Those are the main historical madhabs that coexisted in Yemen for a long time, and the diversity and plurality which never constituted a problem the sectarian question and issue started with the Wahhabi Dawah, which was introduced in Yemen in the beginning of the 80s, which is, created fanaticism and exclusion in certain strata in the Yemeni communities. Otherwise, Yemenis are by nature tolerant. So the Zaydi, the Shafi'i, the Sufi, and the Ismaili were all tolerant to one another. It was only the Wahhabi Dawah that was takfiri towards the other and exclusive towards the other. So in terms of their point of view or their position from the Zaydi madhab, their constituency was the Zaydi community. So from a confessional point of view, they are quite connected to the Zaydi community, and their largest constituency is in the Zaydi community. However, it does not mean that Ansar Allah do not have any criticisms of the Zaydi madhab, and they, for example, the leader al-Houthi believed that in terms of jurisprudence, in terms of certain fields of Sharia in the Zaydi experience, they were too restrictive. So although he came from a Zaydi background, he had some criticisms. In terms of a Shafi'i, Ansarullah quite differentiate quite well between the madhab that is present in Yemen and the Wahhabi Dawah, because the Wahhabi Dawah was made the supposition that Shafi'is were part of it, but Ansarullah differentiate between the two. So their position from the Wahhabis does not extend to the Shafi'is. So their attitude to the Shafi'i and Sufi communities is great, and they have a very good relations, and some of the people who affiliated with them were part of those madhabs, and the revolution when it happened was not restricted to Zaydi communities. But under the aggression, we noticed that the public committees or popular committees for the protection of neighborhoods are from all sorts or all strata and components of the Yemeni community. So this madhab diversity, despite all propaganda and despite all the attempts by the Wahhabi Dawah to create fanaticism and incite trouble and wedges between those madhabs, they were able to overcome it. But the position from the Salafi movement and the Wahhabis, theoretically, they very clearly attack the confessional doctrines of the Wahhabi Dawah based on their Zaydi background and based on the speeches and addresses of the leader martyr al-Houthi. So they criticize those ideas very explicitly. However, practically, they continue to date to deal with it quite practically in areas where the superior or the higher political council governs. There are Wahhabi mosques that are allowed in their action and their work, and their cultural activities, such as Muhammad Imam School and another center in Ib Governorate, in addition to dozens of other mosques that are known to be Salafi and Wahhabi. So although they allow those Wahhabi mosques to operate in Zaydi areas, they are keen on regaining the constituency in the Zaydi and the Zaydi confession in the Zaydi areas after the Wahhabi Dawah, but in ideational and theoretical manner. However, the aggression and the violence put them in a defensive position. And what stands witness to this are some objective reports, such as the report of the Popular Revolution in 2011, and the report of a tribal mediation committee in 2013, and another presidential committee in 2019. They're different reports said that they were on the defensive, and that the Houthis did not take the initiative in aggression against their adversaries, even if they disagree with them. As for their position from the Sufis and the Ismailis, there were a number of phases, because at the time that the Wahhabis used takfir against the Ansarullah, and they were the same that applied this takfir to Sufis and Ismailis. Afterwards, there was also a coordination with the Ismailis in 2013 and 2014, because the Ismailis noticed that this could be an important asset for them to protect them from genocide, and it would create a balance of power in the face of takfiri powers. The Sufis, on the other hand, also were agreed with the Ansarullah in the centrality of the Holy Quran and celebrating the awliya and the birth of Prophet Muhammad, and there were many symbols and figures of the Sufi movement that explicitly and publicly supported the Houthis, and they said that it does not conflict with their Sufi school of thought. So the relations were great. If we mention a very well-known name, which is Sheikh Sahel bin Aqil, who represents the Sufis in Ta'az, who comes from Hadramaut originally, in addition to many other names and figures that go beyond the scope of this paper. So, and if we talk about the relation to tribes, the Yemeni tribes, their relations were very harmonious, since their most of the bulk of Ansarullah are from rural agrarian areas, hence those traditions in agrarian and rural areas, they are shared with the tribal communities. But there was only one point, which is their position from the authoritarian tribesmen who were somewhat feudal in their attitude, were affiliated close to the authority. So their position was to take a negative position from those people rather than from the tribe as a whole. Throughout their relation with the tribal Yemeni tribes, it was all in all positive, but there were some clashes in Umran alongside the public revolution or popular revolution in 2014. But this clash was not with the tribe, but with the tribal militias moved by tribal elites and political elites that have already severed their relations with the tribe. And the Houthis have always called for peace and asked for... Can you please slow down, because the translator cannot keep up with you. Thank you, Dr. Sami. Let alone the peaceful attitude towards the tribe. The Houthis think that the tribe is the origin of the Yemeni community. Even in those wars in Umran, the Houthis Ansarullah, have sought the mediation of an arbitration of the tribes itself. After the prevalence of the revolution in Umran, Ansarullah tried to solve some of the problems which date back to 45 years. And there were many agreements reached with tribes in order to establish civil peace, and including the Brotherhood and Fraternity Agreement and the Peace Charter that has been signed by a number of tribes in Amran Governorate. So over 8 years of revolution, the Ansarullah were able to enter tribal areas that are not from their Zaidi environment, solve some of the problems, and some of the tribes have went into war and during this aggression. And we noticed that Abdul Malik al-Houthi focuses on healing and helping the recovery of those areas. We noticed that those tribal areas that are regained by Ansarullah, they started to hold meetings with the tribes leaders and other figures in order to start to heal and recover, including Al-Bayda, Bushafaq, and other tribes that have been attacked or have been in clashes with the public committees or popular committees. If we look at their relation between Ansarullah and the political parties, this is quite recent, since the Ansarullah have started their political action after the national dialogue in 2014. So their program was mainly based on a political program. It wasn't haphazard or arbitrary, and it was the first phase that Ansarullah moved from just talking about ideology and Quranic methodology directly into drawing or outlining a political program based on this vision, and this was reflected in their experience by putting a political charter or document that expresses and explains their vision. So this is quite advanced, and this is the political experience that they focus upon. Of course, the National Dialogue Program, as it is well known, ended with a setback, a political setback, although it was meant to reach a consensus. But President Hadi and the head and the chair of the National Dialogue took unilateral decisions, authoritarian decisions in very important issues related to the constitution and the form of the state. This caused Ansarullah to take a step back from the political practice or political experience. So they started the idea of going back to the political or revolutionary action, and they started this new revolution, and they started their own charter, political charter that explained their vision. This charter reiterated the importance of participation and inclusion, and Ansarullah, although they were prevailing in the popular revolution, they did not monopolize power, but wanted to take part and share the power. After the aggression in 2015 on Yemen, there was a division among the Yemeni powers. Some of the political powers started to ally with each other in the face of this aggression, while others did otherwise. The Ansarullah started to ally and gather some powers around them. So it started with the National General Conference in 2016. They participated in managing the state in the higher state presidential council, and there was also the permanent committee. In terms of their relation to the Yemeni Conference for Islah or for Reform, there were a number of powers there, but including those who are now our leaders who are present in Qatar or Turkey. Despite the disagreements, they communicate, so their relation with those movements are well, but those who joined the ranks of the aggression and have become part of the aggression on Yemen, they are dealt with as traitors, not as part of Yemeni components. However, the political relation with the reform consortium is, if we look at it objectively, is quite good. Ansarullah have also a good relations with the leaders of the Yemeni Socialist Party since 2019 to date. The positions of the Socialist Party in Yemen have become also clearer in terms of their anti-aggression positions. So once Yemeni forces or powers align against the aggression, they automatically become close to Ansarullah, and hence this relation with the Yemeni Socialist Party is improving. The same applies to the Unitarian Nasserite Union. Every time there is a meeting with the Socialist Party, there is also a representative from the Nasserite movement, since they issued a position against the aggression. As for their relation to other leaders, their position was not based on a political position, but based on the actions of that side who are traitors and sided with the aggression. Ansarullah from 2015 to 2020 issued a number of political initiatives. Al-Mashat issued the political initiative for peace. There were at least three political initiatives for peace, and Ansarullah always believe that the aggression uses the division among Yemeni powers for their own ends, and they try to defend the unity and freedom and sovereignty of their nation, and they call for the return to peace and partnership agreements. So throughout this period, they offered many initiatives and calls for peace, and the current truce in Yemen, which we hope would persist, came as a response to the Mashat's initiative in 2022. To move to Ansarullah's experience with civil society organizations. The composition of Ansarullah, which is mostly rural, makes them a bit suspicious and cautious about civil society, but they found themselves under this pressure in maintaining or sharing this with power with civil society organizations and interacting with them. Of course, most civil society organizations in Yemen were actually phony and were accused of money laundering, etc. But in their new position in power, the Ansarullah used a new policy, which is to cancel the phony organization of more than 17,000 to 1,000 that are really active and genuine. Ansarullah, through controlling the state, have tried to reactivate those organizations and put them into action plans in order to give them their appropriate role. So there is no contradiction or conflict with civil society, particularly those concerned with culture and development, but their problem with civil society organizations are with those that are directly connected with Western embassies, or that spread the liberal thought. But so their position is good, but and also in terms of their relation with the international organizations, they started a council that controls the position of those organizations and civil society organizations within and outside Yemen according to international standards. But of course, the Ansarullah were forced to engage with civil society, particularly those that were engaged in documenting human rights violations by the aggression. So at the beginning, they were tolerant with the activity of civil society, organized it, and then engaged with it. And I assume that their relation with civil society organizations and their engagement after the aggression would grow even further, particularly in developmental fields. Of course, there is another strata that is part of the civil society. When we talk about Ansarullah, they are mostly rural, but the public revolution in 2011 and the other popular revolution in 2014, those revolutions made many urban constituencies and audiences of different walks of life and different political affiliations join ranks with the Ansarullah, and with the passage of time we had more urban leaders, so that helped improve the relations with civil society organizations. Most important achievement in this case was the establishment of the cultural council or cultural committee in the same year of the aggression, 2015. At the same time, the Ansarullah started to, in their discourse addressed to the public, they needed, particularly under the aggression, to start with a civil character to address the educated, cultured, the artists. So they engaged with civil society based on this. So they engaged with those organizations, with their engagement also with leftist and socialist forces and groups, since they are anti-Zionist, anti-aggression, and they agree in many of those common denominators.
والرقصات الشعبية يعني امتدادا لانطلاقتهم من
In arts, they provided the folklore dances and the zajal songs, and afterwards they were providing the operate chanting. And I believe the most important thing in the relation of Ansarullah with the cultural people and artists was the Yemeni establishment for a drama production. They found that they need to face the drama production of the aggression forces. So they started to make good quality series and opera show, soap opera shows. And they are dealing with musicians and with actors and actresses. And by the year, at the end of 2020, we can find that the relation of Ansarullah with the cultural and the artists, they are improving. And we can say also that Ansarullah is learning from their mistakes, and now they are structured and well organized work rather than spontaneous work. And although the experience of ruling is very difficult, but they were able to do that in short years. Of course, they need to have more plans for the political work and to be more open with the different political trends in Yemen and the modern movements and the post-war situation based on the national reconciliation. Thank you very much. Thank you, Mr. Anas. In his paper, he talked about the policies and performance of the movement. In the beginning, he defined the paper that it is a religious revival movement that was present because of the situation in the region and because of the differences that happened after 9/11, and that it started its cultural activity in 2002, and it became active in the society by the year 2004. In terms of the social nature, it is a rural movement, and it shares with the Yemeni tribes a lot of the a lot of characteristics, including the belonging to the Zaydi madhab or a school of thought, and they have good relations with the Shafi'i or other faith groups like the Sufi or the Ismailis. He said that the civil society within Ansarullah is still improving, and that their participation in the Arab Spring was an entry point for that after they got engaged in this civil activity, and they also participated in the they took part in the National Dialogue Conference. He said that this came across with a lot of rightist and leftist groups, and this rise can be marked in 2014 and 2015 with the beginning of the war. In this paper, he talked about a lot of relations in details. He started talking about the madhabs and different religious trends and the school of thoughts. He said that the Yemeni society has diversity in madhabs, and they coexisted with the different madhabs, including, most importantly, the Zaydi, the Shafi'i, the Zaydi and Ismaili groups, and all of these in the history. And he said that the religious problem or the sectarian problem in Yemen started by the entry of the Wahhabi da'wah in the early 80s. That he mentioned that it
عن موقف الحركة من المذهبين الزيدي والشافعي
roots of or the seeds of
مثل مذهبيا البيئة التي احتضنت
in terms of the Zaydi and Shafi'i groups. He said that the Zaydi school of thought was the one that contained the da'wah of Ansarullah, and the da'wah of Ansarullah is not a Zaydi da'wah or a movement, because when Ansarullah shared this ideology with the Zaydis, including, for example, the Shiaism to or loyalty to Al al-Bayt, the family of or the house of Muhammad, this is wider than the this confession alone. And he said the founder of this movement had differences with the Zaydi school of thoughts, like the jurisprudence and the ways of the discretion or in the origin of talk or usul al-kalam and the fiqh. And he said also that Ansarullah differentiate between the Shafi'i as an original Islamic school of thought and the Wahhabi da'wah that claims to belong to the Sunnah and Jama'ah grouping. And he said that their relation with the Shafi'i is very good, and a lot of those who are part of the popular committees are from the Shafi'i school of thought. Nevertheless, he said that there are some ideological problems or differences that they conflict with or differentiate or they have differences with the Shafi'i, and it has to do with history. But in terms of the Salafism, he says that the main adversary of the Ansarullah in Yemen is the Wahhabi Salafist movement that came from Saudi Arabia. He also said that Ansarullah deal with the civil or the peaceful movement on two levels, at the one in the theory and one in the realism. At the level of theory, they find that they focus on the theory, and they defend on the Zaydi school of thought. In reality or in realism, they didn't have any problem or they had a problem. They didn't prevent the Wahhabism from being spread, but they give it place to practice da'wah. As for their relation with Sufism, they said that they have the strong relations and they are linked with the love and loyalty to the house of Muhammad. And they are centered around Quran. And this relation was built into the second one was after 2014, and he gave details about this relation between these different confessions and Ansarullah. Then he talked about the tribe, and he said that the tribe is the main organizational aspect of Yemen, and the tribes of Yemen, in addition to Ansarullah, played an important role in the organization until they took control over the capital city in 2014. He said that in addition to the, or other than the modern movements that have negative impact from the tribal structure, and they consider it to be retroactive, a
خاصة أنهم كنخبة قبلية وقفوا
kind of backward with the
قاتلوا مع
مشيخة or sheikhhood model, and some of them fought with Ansarullah. In terms of their relation with the political parties, he said that the relation of Ansarullah with the political parties is new because their participation was at the beginning of the national dialogue in 2014, because with the beginning of the Arab Spring in 2011, Ansarullah took part in the civil and political activity after the conflict, and the people of Ansarullah participated with the people of the Nasrist group and the people of the revolution. They participated together. He said that the comprehensive or the inclusive national conference in 2014 was an important turning point because they participated in it formally, and they provided their national vision, including the Sada area, or the vision of Sada area, because they represented it. And in terms of the dialogue, they have differences with different political groups, but they had some points that were getting that were in line with other political groups. They participated also in, or this political practice allowed them to show their vision and their opinion to a number of cases. Before that, they didn't have any political program, and it was merely ideological program. Afterwards, he talked in details about the relation of Ansarullah to a number of Yemeni political groups. He said that, for example, the Al-Hizb al-Shabi, it is a partnership, and for Al-Islah group, he said that the relation with the leadership that are against the aggression is good, especially those who are living in Qatar or in another place, and they meet together and they coordinate with each other. However, the leadership that, or the leaders who were dragged into the capitals of aggression, as he called them, so the relationship with them is very bad. The socialist Yemeni party, he says that the relation is very good with them, and the central group of the party is in Sana'a and is functioning with them. In terms of the popular Nasrist group, he said that the relation is good and they communicate with high-ranking officers in this party at the level of the leadership and the central committee. Then he said that Ansarullah movement made a number of initiatives, and here he listed 11 initiatives. He said that the movement presented to its partners in the homeland in order to stop the war. They were not welcome. Initiatives wanted to have a participatory political vision that can be implemented in the transitional period until they can go back to a state of partnership, which is different from the model that was in place before that. Nevertheless, Ansarullah movement believe that the national partnership should take place through a vision that includes two main ideas. The first is related to having a terms of reference and a mechanism that organizes this partnership, which is the constitution, and a mechanism through which this can be implemented, which is expressing the free will that represent the popular willingness and desire. And here I believe he means the elections. Before that, he talked about the relation with the civil society organizations, and he said the nature of the rural structure of Ansarullah makes them more concerned from or more concerned about the civil society organizations. However, in the past year, they managed to get them closer to those civil society organizations. He said that there are two kinds of these CSOs. One
الثقافي والمدني والحقوقي والرياضي والتنموي
is local,
وهنا
and the local nature is more present or prevailing, and they used to work in sports and in other activities, and they try to engage with them, and others maybe are linked to foreign intelligence agencies, and they are concerned about them,
الأمر الأخير
and there
وهو موقفهم من شريحة
might be cases of cracking down on them. The last time was their position towards artists and culture.
وهو نوع من التوجس ثم فصل في الأنشطة الثقافية
and cultivate people. He said that the speaker, it seems that the signal is bad.
من خلال الفن ومن خلال
He says that recently their relationship is getting more and more positive, and they are trying to do cultural activities through drama, through music, and through other things. Finally, he said that the experience is improving through learning from the lessons, and it is moving from spontaneous activity to a well-organized and structured work, and they are more capable to work with civil society organizations. And despite the hardships of the ruling, however, they learned a lot, which would have taken years to learn if they didn't practice ruling, and this requires them to put political programs that will put them in good terms with other political trends, and will have more openness to modern movements and other political movements that will help them to coexist together in the peaceful period or in the post-war period. Thank you very much, Mr. Anas. Now we move to the third speaker, or the third paper, under the title The floor is yours.
بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. اللهم صل وسلم على سيدنا محمد وعلى آله الطيبين الطاهرين.
In the name of God, the most merciful, the most bountiful, all the praise and blessing
أكرر الشكر والتقدير
be upon the Messenger Muhammad, peace be upon him. First, I would like to thank and appreciate Dr. Sami Al-Arian, the head of SIGA, for this invitation. In my paper, the title that you say, Ansarullah movement and their politics after the post-Arab Spring. I divided this paper into three topics. The first topic, or the first headline, is Ansarullah, the revolution and the civilized project. The second one, the topic, the politics of Ansarullah, and the third one, the achievements and the confrontation of the aggression. Or thwarting the aggression. In this paper, of course, I limited my paper to a certain number of words, and I hope that I will be able to summarize the work and to cover everything that was put in the paper. Of course, Ansarullah movements with their renaissance. Of course, Yemen in general, or the problem of Yemen in general, is about having a national authority that accommodates the Yemeni people and that can make use of their resources to strategically and comprehensively serve the Yemeni people, and that problem was because the neighboring countries didn't want to have any such project through the tools and agents of those countries in Yemen. Those countries worked on foiling these projects or initiatives. Of course, in the 70s, when President Hamdi was in the presidency, Yemen couldn't move, and he wanted to make independence for Yemen, but foreign countries foiled that problem. In the beginning of the 90s, with the unity of Yemen, this important historic event, it was a blow for the tools of those agents, which were two political systems, two economic systems, and two military systems were joined together. This was very worrying to other countries to have Yemen as a strong political, economic, and military force that is out of control. So foreign countries in 1994 worked on destroying the Yemeni army. And the war of 1994, if we go back to the memory, to the 1930s, we find that in 1934, the Ataif agreement ended the war between Yemen and Saudi Arabia. In 1954, this was renewed because there is a provision in this agreement that it will be renewed every 20 years. In 1974, it was renewed, and the meeting was in
بسبب نفيهما التوقيع على اتفاق سنة 2000.
The foreign minister was in Beirut. He said that in 1974 the agreement was not signed, and that was declared by Saudi Arabia. In this period, afterwards, the political system in Yemen and the military and the economic system in Yemen were destroyed, and the foreign countries used to look at or made Ali Abdullah Saleh in 1995 to sign on a memorandum of understanding about the Yemeni borders, and that was ended in the year 2000 when the agreement of Jeddah ended the provisions of Al-Taif agreement, and which infringed the Yemeni rights that were recognized for over 60 years. Mr. Hussein Badruddin al-Houthi, may God bless him, had a vision, and the foreign countries understood that this project is not only for the renaissance of Yemen economically, but it is an ideological project that will take Yemen out of the foreign control. So Badruddin al-Hassani, al-Houthi, had an awareness program, and this project will continue in time and is not limited to a specific time or a specific geography. I believe that this project or those Al-Houthi, the founder of this project, understood that this Mr. Hussein said that there is occupation over the Arab country. He said that the current imperial is taking control over countries with a number of terrorists that are spread here and there, and these issues, these groups or those imperialist groups, they are spreading the terrorist groups in different countries as a justification, as a pretext to control these issues. And in the politics of the United States, they master the art of creating the adversary and putting it under control, and they're using these enemies whatever and wherever they want. Al-Houthi was able to understand that, and he expressed that by saying that in this time the issues became very difficult in terms of the Jews and the Christians. They have no limit to have an Arab leader to be a police officer under the control of those countries. All of them are like that, and this is a very miserable issue. Mr. Hussein, may God bless him, with sensing the dangers of the Ummah, he shouldered the responsibility, and he said that every Muslim should be part of this responsibility, and we can say that Islam itself came to share responsibility in this issue. And
Mr. Hussein here
he says that the issues of Ummah should be shouldered by the entire Ummah,
adopted by all of the nation, all of the Ummah, including the Palestinian cause. And we cannot distance ourselves from it. We cannot establish relations with the Jews This cannot be done as long as they are observers of our sacred places, of our Palestine. This is the responsibility of all Muslims. We cannot let go of this responsibility and evade this responsibility and call it a Palestinian issues. So this distribution of responsibility is not enshrined in the Holy Quran. Also, the Renaissance project of Al-Hussein, of Mr. Sheikh Hussein, was also based on the idea of the ulama or the Islamic scholars, and he advised that they learn and become examples and role models. So they should not be weak and their positions should not be affected by their weaknesses. And he cautioned against hegemony and colonization in their new forms. And whoever of the Islamic scholars takes the lead in confronting this has to be fully aware of his surroundings and of the challenges that face the Ummah. And that's why he thinks that those who face up to those challenges cannot be judged by their beard, by their miswak, or by their appearance, but by being role models to this Ummah. How can we expect those who see Islam only as a short gown and a long beard to be able to stand up to the Jews or other aggressors? So this project of the leader was quite serious, and Ansarullah used all of the authority tried to fight this project by all means, and all these powers and their agents were able to assassinate Al-Hussein al-Houthi because they regarded this as the most important threat to their existence in the region and in Yemen, and they soon proved it to be wrong, because this idea was overtaken by Abdul Malik Abdullah al-Houthi, who took up the front in 4 wars against authoritarian powers, and his project and the project of the late Hussein al-Houthi became an important pillar for the popular uprising. And it was one of the mobilizers of the revolution in 2011, including when the agreement was made on the revolution. Ansar Allah were in the forefront of the powers who tried to recover and resume initiative from its observers. In terms of their position from the Arab Spring, the Yemeni people were no exception from the Arab peoples, because the Yemeni people have been subject to the same kind of West or foreign affiliated agents or authorities, and what they faced is similar to what other revolutions faced, as many local, international, and regional powers tried to confront and fail this revolution. But after the Yemeni people were able to overcome those conspiracies, these powers moved from conspiring to direct military action under the banner of regaining legitimacy from the coup powers. And this aggression was an embodiment of aggression against the Yemeni revolution. And at first glimpse, and based on the hegemony of the external powers, they claim to believe in the rights of the Yemeni people, in their freedom and right to elect and select their leaders, and what they deny or object to was only the coup, and with all the aggressions and all the violations that they commit, they still claim to protect the Yemeni people. And this has lasted for 7 years, and it is not ambiguous to see that most countries in the alliance of aggression are not democratic themselves and have no value to the rights of the people. So there is a sheikh or a prince or whoever holds power have subjects rather than citizens and have absolute power over their people. And under this pretext of regaining legitimacy, they tried to say that they are against the coup and they just want to regain legitimacy in their own regard or in their view. But it has recently turned out, just before Ramadan, that those external powers are not concerned with the alleged legitimacy or with the rights of the Yemeni people. Because they continued with their aggression for more than 7 years under this banner, which is the resumption of legitimacy and the resumption of President Hadi. But at the end of the day, they finally toppled Hadi and expelled him and started a transitional council, regardless of any legitimacy or any Yemeni decision in this. And they did a flagrant action of a substitution of their will instead of Yemeni people's will. The criticism against Ansarullah is that they took power of the state by staging a coup to the legitimate power, but there is an ambiguity here and there is misleading terminology. We have to differentiate between coups and revolutions. Maybe the occupant powers and traitors and agents would understand at last that what happened in Yemen is a popular revolution that is pure of any resemblance to being a coup. The notion of revolution, it is an unorganized popular political movement aiming to change the dominant political system. So it is a point of convergence for all revolutionary figures, and this defines or reflects the maturity of the Yemeni people. And here some parts or categories of the people, such as Ansarullah, may take the initiative to take the lead in this revolution, and hence this strata, by being brave and forthcoming, would take the forefront and move to the next stage like what happened in Yemen, or face the violence of the existing or de facto authority, which may actually exterminate it altogether after all the sacrifices they have offered. But hence they tried, or they would try to reach the appropriate ambitions of the revolution. On the contrary, a coup is an organized action by an organized group that tries to take power by substituting the existing authorities. So revolution is a comprehensive change and essential change, and that's not the case in the coup. And the coup usually happens from within the authority itself, and the coup is staged by people in the authority and in power. And Ansarullah, when they staged the revolution, they were not part of power. They were totally excluded. They were just a popular movement, and this popular revolution is truly a popular revolution, and the use of the word coup is only a misleading term, and it's also one of the manifestations of aggression on the Yemeni people. Also, in a coup, there are positions given to the members of this organized group who takes the defense, the security, etc. But in the revolution, there is only initiative, and those positions are distributed amongst revolution leader only after the success of the revolution. What happened in the revolution of 2014 on the 11th of February? The banner of this revolution was to reform the regime in all its components, and this revolution extended across the different squares and different places, and it trapped the regime. But there were some things that disturbed this revolution and allowed the authority to seek support, external support, that failed the revolution. Ali Mohsen Al-Ahmar, for example, the old general who was an important pillar of the military power of the de facto regime, he came as part of the revolution in order to end the revolution in the face of the regime's thugs, as he claimed. And of course, they started this military action claiming to protect the revolution, although the revolution needs no protection, and the protection is only accorded by the consciousness and the ability and willingness to sacrifice. So no external protection is needed for a genuine revolution. And this is a lesson not only for this generation, but for the next. So in this military action, with that pretext of protection, the amount or extent of protection was not defined or clear. And even if we talk about only the revolution squares, then they would have restricted the revolution only to certain places, and any negotiation between the military and any other powers would define the outcomes rather than the powers of the revolution. Also, this protection did not extend. Actually, the very military action was a slippery slope for the revolution, taking it away from its peaceful character. So this military element was an outsider to the true character of the revolution. There would have no presence for any revolution. Dr. Abdurrahman, I would like to tell you that you have almost consumed 20 minutes of your time. How long? More? 20 more minutes? Can you finish in 15, please? Can you be as brief as possible? This is a rather expansive issue. There are very well-known issues, so you can skip them. And the paper is going to be published, so you can only highlight the most important things. So now we've been talking about the military element, which was an outsider to the revolution, but there was also a political factor with a number of exploiting political parties who tried to co-opt the revolution for their own ends, and this was positive on the one hand, as they provided some support, but then the negative side was that they were working for their own ends, exploiting the momentum of the revolution. Hence, the revolution of the 11th of February became a lacking coup. We defined the coup as a way of trying to to remove power and take power. Instead, it was a semi-coup. So those who took part in the revolution and exploited the revolution were in agreement actually with the existing power and the ruler, and wanted to start with taking power and ending the popular gatherings and sit-ins in the popular revolution. The revolutionists quickly realized that the revolution has been hijacked and that their martyrs have sacrificed for nothing, and that the authority is trying to re-emerge. So they did not give up on the revolution and tried to protest and continue their protests and marches to restore and regain the revolution, to expel those who conspired against it. On the 21st of September, we had a revolution that had a philosophy different from any other, whether as modern, old, or contemporary, because this revolution was rather tolerant, and its demand included reforming the corrupt people and to abide by the ideas and principles of the revolution. Ansarullah movement and their relation with the Arab and the regional and the region, their relation with the neighboring or the surrounding countries were clear, because they wanted to refrain from the existing satellite status of the state, and they insisted on non-refraining from interfering in the internal affairs of the countries, and on maintaining the sovereignty of their nation state while maintaining good relations with other countries without contradiction. So this was very different from the attitude of the existing regime. So this tendency to free oneself from affiliation and co-option to Western and other powers was not to the liking of those powers. So they tried not only to contain this revolution, but all the revolution of the Arab world. So they tried to do both, get rid of the existing regimes or rulers which have become too old and rusty, but at the same time replace them with destroy the Arab social cohesion and fabric. And for this demonic end, they established two pillars. One is repression and the other is containment. On the repression level, they confronted violently the revolution, and they supported the regimes through support with money and media, etc. And that played a great role in many Arab countries, and the most important of those are Emirates and the Saudi Arabia, and those were supposed to contain the governments that emerge from those popular uprisings. While if the repression failed, then they would use the containment approach to contain those governments that emerge from those Arab revolutions. And the most important actors in this containment were Turkey and Qatar. Despite the fact that those two pillars or those two approaches were operated in Yemen, none of them totally succeeded. And after 2015, Saudi Arabia and the Emirates were unable to support the ruler in Sana'a, despite all the support they offered to the former president and the one that followed. And they thought that by assigning Hadi as an affiliated president would confiscate the Yemeni will, but this was quickly proven wrong, as the Yemeni people did not give in, and the Saudis and the Emiratis originally were supposed to leave the way for the Turkish and the Qataris, but because of the peculiarity of the situation in Yemen, they started the aggression using the oppression approach in 2015. The other point is that is Ansarullah governance and politics. They took up politics in 2015. It was under exceptional circumstances, and of course, those exceptional circumstances necessitated exceptional rules of governance during this phase. Those provisions included the constitutional declaration in February 2015. Ansarullah were more mature and aware and conscious than those who have been in public affairs and public offices for decades. So when there was a government in Aden and the capital was moved to Aden, there was no constitutional grounds for many of their behavior. He could have suspended their constitution to act as he will, but actually he never did, and he acted contrary to the constitution, committing practically constitutional offenses. As for Ansarullah's position from the constitution, the revolution succeeded, and when any revolution succeeds, they would either suspend the constitution or they would adopt the constitutional provisions as the revolution and consider them as the provisions for the transitional period. And in this case, the government would be called a constitutional government. Of course, in terms of the position from general public freedoms and rights, the Constitutional Declaration guaranteed public freedoms. This was very clear related to public freedoms. It did not specify legal, political, social freedoms, and which reiterates or asserts that the leadership of the revolution have adopted the spirit of the constitution in relation to those rights, which means that this revolutionary government is committed to protect those public liberties and rights. It's also known that when a revolution succeeds, usually the body that was in leadership of this revolution, they become the heroes and they accuse the others or those who are defeated with treason, etc., or imprison them. This is quite typical to all revolutions when the revolutionaries take power, but this was very different in Yemen actually, because the Ansarullah were very mature. They did not open the floor for detention or for executions, and they extended a hand of tolerance with all other parties, and they tried to reform themselves and participate and take part in governing this state, and they required that the government would resign. The president and the government resigned, but what happened at the time was a crime, basically, because they refused to give up government. They refused to continue to work as an acting government while a new government is elected. In normal circumstances, this is usually an offense that can be used as a charges to be tried before a court of justice.
المفارقة حركة أنصار الله إنجازات ومواجهة العدوان. أول إنجاز من الإنجازات التي حققتها ثورة 21 سبتمبر هو المحافظة على مؤسسات الدولة من الانهيار.
The achievements of Ansarullah. The first achievement is protecting the state from collapse. After the success of the 21st of September revolution, the devilish plan was to get the institutions of the state to collapse. And of course, when the government resigns and when the Prime Minister stays at home and the Minister of Defense stays at home, the institutions will break down, and these institutions break down, and the system will break down, and the society will get into chaos. This devolution plan was an alternative plan that was made that wanted to affect self-destruction in Yemen, and that was after the referendum on the constitution, because the constitution had the roots of conflict, and there was at the lower levels of the administration in the country, and they wanted to destroy and to destroy Yemen and to support the conflicting parties, but the revolution managed to foil the plans of the aggression. Number two, the second achievement is ending the client relationship with the agents or being agents to other countries. Since the 70s, they were a kind of agency to other countries, and this higher level of the state was unable to appoint anybody at certain levels in the public administration unless there are foreign embassies influencing or involving in the country. And they wanted to not to have self-agency in the country. In the past decades, as I said, the foreign embassies were controlling the scene, and they were controlling everything about the Yemenis. After the third achievement, it was destroying the spying centers. The foreign countries wanted to control their plans or to implement their plans through their embassies, and when the revolution won, these countries found that it is risky to their themselves and to their agents inside Yemen. So we were able to capture the problems or the tools that were used for those spies, and they destroyed all of these tools and equipment, and everybody have seen the smoke that was getting from the embassies, and that was showing that this was the smoke of betrayal and espionage, and they have used all of these tools and equipments for their spies, and they ended them when the revolution won. The governments, the Yemeni governments before the revolution, it was an obedient follower of those embassies. After that, the fourth achievement, limiting or containing the terrorist actors. When all of these tools failed, they gave full weight to the terrorist groups. These terrorist groups wanted to make or to spread fear and terror amongst people through the bloodshed, and this didn't continue for a long time. The revolution managed to eliminate those terrorists in their own strongholds, and these foreign countries, they used all of their force for the success of those terrorist groups, but we managed to eliminate that. So foreign countries, it wasn't easy for them to lose their tools that they relied on, and those terrorist groups are still or continue to get some support from their sponsors, but the elements of Al-Houthi managed to blow them with fatal blows and eliminated them. The fifth achievement was the revolution managed to face the international and the Saudi aggression against Yemen. Of course, this aggression wasn't spontaneous. It was linked with previous or former facts, but it was under monitoring. And if whenever Yemen wanted to have an renaissance project, it will be confronted by the foreign countries and the neighboring countries, on top of which the regime of the Saud House or the House of Saud. And there were three manifestations in Yemen. First, not to have a national authority that can take control over Yemen in all aspects. The second one, not to make use of the strategic position of Yemen or geopolitical position of Yemen. And third point is not to make use of the resources of Yemen. These concerns was always a concern for the foreign countries, because they didn't want Yemen to benefit from their resources through a national authority that can make a comprehensive development. Of course, the popular committees and the army confronted the terrorist groups and the tools of other countries, and they confronted the global coalition that was led by Saudi Arabia, which included the 27 countries. And on the 26th of March 2015, they waged this war in order to restore legitimacy, as they claimed. And we learned that legitimacy is just a lie, that because legitimacy doesn't mean aggression, but it means that preparing new agents and new enemies. And of course, this is something that we have made through we have been confronting for 7 years, and they wanted to impose surrender on the leadership of the revolution. But we are still steadfastly, we are still resisting this aggression, and the aggression is being is losing now, and it will lose more and more
شكرا جزيلا دكتور
in the coming period. Thank you very much. Thank you, Dr. Abdulrahman Al-Mukhtar. In his paper, he talked in 3 topics. The first one was about Ansarullah movement as a renaissance and revolution project. The second topic was about their performance in politics and the government. And the third one was about the achievements and confronting the aggression, as he called it. Under the first topic, he said that the main problem of Yemen was with the foreign powers to have a national government that can make use of the resources of the country for a comprehensive development. That's why foreign countries didn't want to have any renaissance project that can be implemented practically on the ground. Then he said that after unifying Yemen in 1994, that this event was a historic turning point, and it became worrisome to foreign countries because it goes contradictory to their interest in Yemen. In his opinion, that the more worrisome project was the ideological renaissance project that was called to by Sayyid Hussein al-Houthi. And he said that the foreign countries understood that this project is not only for the economic development of Yemen, but rather an ideological and liberation project that will get Yemen out of the control of foreign countries. Then he talked about the prospects of the project and its centrality, and he said that the centrality of the project is that the Muslim Ummah is an entire Ummah that cannot be separated. And he said that Islam itself came to share responsibility amongst its people, or its sons. Then he talked more about this project, that it is
في ثورة فبراير 2011 وتحدث في
the point, the movement of
متعلقة بمفهوم الثورة.
Renaissance.
أن الثورة هي فعل.
In this regard, he talked about 2 issues, about the notion of revolution and the notion of coup. He said that the revolution is a spontaneous, popular movement that happens without planning, that wants to make a change in all of the aspects of the community. According to this notion, there was a meeting point of the demands of all the revolutionists. And that's what we have seen in the beginning of the revolution. And the movement was one of the groups that joined the ranks of this revolution, whereas the coup can be defined as an organized action by an organized group that whose organizers want to take authority or to take control. So if we take this definition, we look at these two actions, the revolution of February 2011 and the revolution of 2014, September 2014. In 2011, we found that there is a real revolution, but there were other points that got into, including the military and the security and the political event or aspect. And he said that this was a kind of a coup that didn't continue against the revolution that happened in 2011. And the sharing of the political or governmental positions between the revolutionists and those people tried to continue that coup. So that's why he says that the revolution of September 2014 came as a response to this semi-coup. And then he talked about the philosophy of this revolution, and he said that this revolution has its own philosophy to deal with the corrupt people who made or spread corruption in the community, and that other revolution, it is not similar to other revolutions. It didn't come to crack down on what came before it, but it came to correct the situation and to give others the share of responsibility according to this new trend. And he gave evidence to that, what he called the peaceful partnership in order to have shared responsibility in social, economic, political, and security issues. Then he talked about the regional and the Arab relations in terms of policies, and he said that it came through a constitutional declaration by this movement that the foreign relations of the state should be based on non-interference in the affairs of other countries and the good neighborhood, and to use peaceful means to resolve conflicts and to promote shared interests in a way that protects the higher interests of those countries. And he said that this wouldn't have been accepted by the groups that wanted to be in control. And then the aggression came, that he said that it wasn't for the reason of bringing back legitimacy as they claim, but those countries wanted, they saw the seriousness of the forces of the revolution to establish a free and independent Yemen away from hegemony and control. He said that foreign countries worked slyly in order to foil this revolution, and what this revolution made is that they got rid of the corrupt leaders that were before, and they made the change. And in this field, he talked about two axes that are facing the revolution. The first one was, he called it the crackdown axis. It is the Emirati Saudi one that started the aggression against Yemen, and the second one is the containment axis, which is the Turkish Qatari one, but he believes that they both have the same goal. And he said that they mentioned those two lines, but it's surprising that he never mentioned Iran. I hope that in the questions we can have a mention of Iran, or what was the role of Iran. Then Abdul Rahman talked about the achievements, or the second topic was achievements and the aggression. He said that there were a number of important achievements in this issue. First of all, maintaining the institutions from collapse, and this is a unique and extraordinary achievement, that it is a revolutionary force, and they want to maintain institutions and not to rebuild new state institutions, but rather maintaining the state institutions from collapsing. The second one, getting rid of custody and affiliation, and they eliminated the espionage centers and the agents, and also eliminating the terrorist groups that were tools of the other countries, and that they used a lot of violence, and and these groups wanted to put or to spread the chaos in the area, and the global coalition was the one that spread violence in Yemen. And he said that in the modern image, there were three manifestations of this state. The first one, or of those forces, after their aggression to fail, they have three manifestations. The first one was to prevent Yemen from making use of its geostrategic position, and not to make use of the resources, and not to have a stable government. After 7 years, the movement remained resilient and steadfast, and it is still insisting on getting its rightful right or legitimate right to rule Yemen, regardless of the high price that will be paid. Thank you very much, Dr. Abdulrahman Al-Mukhtar. And now we will move to the last paper before we hear the comments, and it will be about the lessons learned and the future prospects by the fourth speaker. The floor is yours.
الصوت
You can't hear
مغلق.
the speaker.
الصوت مغلق سيدي الكريم. هل ممكن تفتح الصوت؟ لا نسمعك. هل أنت في نفس القاعة؟ هل هو أنتم ما زلتوا في طيب تفضل.
لحظة.
لا نسمعك حتى الآن، لا نسمعك دكتور عرفات، ما أعرف إيش المشكلة. هل أنت هل هذا الميكروفون متصل بالكمبيوتر ولا أنت تتحدث من الكمبيوتر مباشرة؟ هم في نفس القاعة؟ نفس القاعة.
I can't hear you. There is a problem with the microphone. Can you speak through the computer itself, or check the battery if it's out?
ما زلنا لا نسمع. مش عارف هذه المشكلة عندنا احنا بس ولا الكل يسمع. Can you hear? تفضل. تفضل قل شيء حتى نعرف. ممكن تبدأ. احنا حتى الآن لا نسمع شيء. يعني مش عارف ايش اللي تغير، لانه نفس الجهاز ونفس المكان.
والله ما تسمع الآن؟
تفضل. ايه تفضل. لا نسمع
الآن الصوت واضح؟
الصوت واضح.
Now we can hear you. Who is speaking?
الصوت واضح
الآن نسمع.
Do you hear me now? Yes, we can hear you now.
السلام عليكم ورحمة الله.
Okay, peace be upon you. First, I would like to thank Professor Sami Al-Aryan and the president of SIGA in Sabah Zai University in Istanbul. I will talk about under the title that I was made, or that I was asked to speak in, the lessons learned of Ansarullah movement and the future prospects, and I will try not to repeat.
أهمية البحث في تسليط الضوء على حقيقة الحركة كما هي في الواقع لا كما قدمت من خلال
for me talked about. Of this research is to talk about the reality of the movement and as it is seen by its adversary. And my research wants to see or look into the ideology of the movement through its literature and what has been stated by the martyr leader Hussein Badr Din al-Houthi and Mr. Abdul Malik al-Houthi. May God protect him. I have 3 topics under my title: the introduction of the movement and its thoughts, the lessons learned from the past. The
بالنسبة لحركة
topic
أنصار الله. يقال أن كل مشروع فكري يراد
is the
مشروع نهضويا للمجتمع وللأمة.
it is said that any ideological project that wants to be a renaissance project, it should start from the concerns of its society and takes care of the problems of the concerns of the Ummah. And we can measure the success of any ideological project through how linked its proposal with the reality, how it is in line with the reality, and how it is being implemented in general. First of all, the change that will lead, or the change that is made in the spirits and minds of those who are following this project, and through the reality that is being lived. And then we can measure it through the position and the stances of the foreign countries and the adversary countries from that project. The functional entities that are affiliated with the foreign countries and how they have done and what they have done. This was made with the Nasserist project, with our differences with that project, and that was repeated with the project of the project of Hussein Badr Din al-Houthi. So throughout modern history, no person has witnessed what Mr. Badr Din al-Houthi has witnessed, because his ideas and his thoughts were thought of. And for example, Mr. Hussein Badr Din al-Houthi has gone through 6 wars that were fierce wars, and because of
في الدستور والقانون
his
ما كتب عن حركة أنصار الله
his ideology, and because everything that has been said about the Ansar Allah movement, it was they were against this movement, and they didn't listen to, or it was taken about the adversary of the movement and not by the people who are affiliated with the movement. I mean, everything that has been written about the movement, they are ideological points, and they are written by people who are from the groups who fought Ansar Allah, whether in the 6 wars that started in July 2004 and ended in February 2010, or through the aggression that Ansar Allah has gone through after the 20th of September. So I'm going to go through some of the definitions that are provided by the adversary of Ansar Allah, and I'm going to respond to them according to what has been provided by some of the people with Ansar Allah, in order not to have this lame or ideologized reading of the movement. So the Houthi movement, as introduced or defined by its adversary, it is a political movement, a Shia movement in Yemen from the Zaydi, and this Shia movement was always known when the conflict erupted in 2004, and the incident that was made, that was known, it was only about having the announcement of having an Ithna Ashari Shia movement inside Yemen. Some of the analysts or researchers say that the Houthi movement considers the Sunnah and Jama'ah group as their adversary. They cannot coexist with them. And one of the signs of the appearance of their Mahdi is through the elimination of the Sunnis and to taking control over the 2 holy shrines or the 2 holy mosques in Saudi Arabia. Of course, Of course, what we have in the Houthi movement is, of course, completely wrong, because Mr. Badruddin al-Houthi says that our own Mahdi is the Quran. So this is against the ideology of al-Ithna Ashariya Shia, and this accusation. We can find that it goes away when we read what Badruddin al-Houthi writes in his lectures that were made into notebook, and what we see in the statements of Abdul Malik al-Houthi recently. Some of the researchers who looked into the al-Houthi movement, who belong to al-Islah movement or the Muslim Brotherhood, Mr. Abdul Salah or one of the researchers in his book, which is called the reality of the reality of the Houthi movement. He says that we see that the Houthi movement is completely on odds with the Ithna Ashari Shia movement, and because they have different ideology, and in terms of the Mahdi, and in terms of the Al-Khums, or the fifth of the wealth. And another researcher is one of the most important writers who talked about Ansarullah movement, and he says that Ansarullah movement is not an idea that we can define in a comprehensive definition. This movement didn't come from the outer space. It is the result of a popular movement, and because of the division in the country, and it is loaded with the vertical and horizontal differences with the government and with the regime, and it puts the infrastructure or the popular support, mobilize it with this side or that side because of the conflicts. And when we look at the literature of this conflict is based on these conflicts, and it is incited by writers who are party to this conflict, and that's why they have expressed their own concerns instead of the objective reading of this movement. We can say that Ansarullah al-Houthi have ideological and cultural project that is based on the Holy Quran. So if you read the lectures of the martyred leader Badruddin al-Houthi, you can see that there are 4 principles that he set for his Quranic project. These principles started from the Quran. The most important one is that Quran is a guiding book, which means that it can guide the human beings, which is necessary for everything in their life. And Allah Almighty said that everything is mentioned in the Holy Quran, which means everything is there that we need in our life. And the second principle is about the knowledge of the Quran, which means from knowing that there is no God but Allah. And when we say Allah is the greatest, it means that we don't recognize any tyrant on this on the earth, especially the American tyrant, whether in its economically or politically or militarily. And then the third one is the complete belief in the unity of Allah. So we know that everything that was mentioned in the Quran is true. So when there are wars that are waged by the Houthi, it was waged by under the slogan that the victory can only come from Allah. And also, when if you want to understand how the Ansarullah Houthi managed to survive 6 wars, you have to go back to these points that Al-Houthi said that the weapon that made Muslims win over the Romans was the Holy Quran, and this should be the weapon that be adopted by Muslims in their wars with the Zionists, with their historic enemy, which is the Zionists. And also, Allah the Almighty, when ordain people to perform jihad and to defend themselves, it is one of the mercy, one of aspects of the mercy of Allah, because when Allah says that you have to fight your enemy, Abdul Malik al-Houthi, when he talked about fighting Daesh in Syria and Iraq, and even what the United States or the Zionists have done He says that if we don't defend ourselves, then our destiny will be the destiny of those people everywhere and every place. So it's a project comes up from certain rules and it has certain characteristics. Now, some people might ask, how is it an Quranic project? Some people studied
Many
this
scholars have
issue,
studied
and
the
they
Muslims
know
and
that the Quran
Arabs,
is a weapon for the
and
Arabs and the Muslims,
they
and it's
know
helped them
that it
to
was
win over the
Islam and
Persians and the
that the
Romans.
arms that gave the Muslims the upper hand over the Romans and the Farsis, and that Mr. Hussein who was the establisher of this project. He was the man of the time. He, at the time, put the slogan to the US when they said, whoever with us is not with us is against us. People understand this slogan different from what he meant when he said death to America. He meant the death to the American idea, to the phony model that it tries to impose itself through globalization and the globalization of culture on all individuals, cultures, and peoples. So death to this phony claim of democracy, freedoms, human rights, etc., and protecting justice while they commit all of those mistakes. So it is this idea that we needed to kill in our societies and in our minds. So after the occupation of or the invasion of Iraq by the US, whether in the Second Gulf War or in 2003, they were able to do this through a media propaganda that made America in the consciousness and the collective consciousness of the people as the invincible power. So Hussein tried to defeat this. So he was the man of the time because he was able to seize the historic moments. As I said, if we are to learn the true identity of this project, we need to understand it for what it is. Hello. There is some disturbance, some intervention in this sound. Can you please mute your microphones? Thank you. Please go ahead, sir. If we are to describe the founder of Ansarullah project, we can take a description of him by what those who criticized him or who were opposed to him, like Mr. Abdullah al-Dakhshi, he said that this man who had an outstanding presence in his own circles and outside them for a number of reasons, particularly his revolutionist tendency, in addition to his attractive discourse, unconventional discourse in his circles, particularly in his environment, which provided him with an extraordinary charismatic character. For example, he cannot but acknowledge that he is captivating in his speeches and in his way of persuasion. Whether you agree with him or not, he uses examples, comparison, and other cases in point in order to provide clarity to his speech. And his project was also neutral and based and enshrined in the Quran and based mainly on the Holy Quran. So the advantage and the main privilege of this program was importantly was that it was cross-confessional, across madhab, that is. So it wasn't restricted to a certain madhab or a certain school of thought. He realized that Quran is the point of agreement by all Muslims. They might disagree on much, but not on the Quran. And that's why he called for a return to Quran. And he criticized the Ithnay Ashariya, the Zaydiyya, all the schools of thought, because they proposed themselves or they introduced themselves as alternatives to the Quran. Even in terms of the Zaydi school, he did not stop ijtihad or discretion, but he said we needed to change this from mere ijtihad or discretion to jihad, because we are in a war with the US. We need ijtihad in the face of this enemy, the Taghut, which all Abrahamic messages warn against. So this was the most important message of the Holy Quran, according to him. So this Quranic project was more or less human. He cared for laymen, for the normal person, and for building human resources. He was able to unleash unprecedented potential from ordinary people who could stand up over decades against the United States and against the Takfiri movements such as Wahhabis, with all the support and backing they receive from other countries. And what we learned from the WikiLeaks documents. And as Ali Abdullah Saleh said, we fight the Houthis on behalf of the US. So those who instructed the war against the Houthis in Sada was the embassy of the US. So Hussein said that we have this slogan as a freedom of expression, and they curse Prophet Muhammad and offend Islam under the same slogan. But against us, they waged a number of wars because of that freedom of expression. And he wanted us to be very clear about who the true enemy was. Hence, this enlightening Quranic project aimed to build an enlightened Muslim nation. And this would happen only through a believer, a true Muslim who cares both for the local causes as well as Arab Islamic causes. The Ansarullah project was also a developmental awakening, a project that is based on an enlightened vision under Abdul Malik al-Houthi, and this was reflected in the behavior of the individuals. If people know how people lived in Sada before and after, and how education was more widespread, and how communities started to understand what they want, what's their identity, and have a vision for the future, and they would realize the magnitude of the change that was introduced by this project in Sada as well as Yemen at large. So this project is a renewal project. It starts with renewing and reforming the individual, reaching to the community. We know that the Arab reformist discourse is based on a reformist community, the reformists themselves, and the Houthis were a methodology, leadership, and ummah. The methodology was the Quran, the leadership was Mr. Abdul Malik now, and formerly the Hussein, and the nation is those who follow this leadership. Hence, this project was an awakening or a developmental project. It is always those projects that are counter or combat external intervention. And anybody who follows the Houthis would know that they recognize the Zionists and the Americans as the main enemy. That's why in their discourse they warn against this enemy, because it is the Taghut mentioned in the Holy Quran. And this awakening discourse was also anti-Western and was a peer and a counterpart of the West, rather than an assimilated entity to the West. And in their introduction of a new identity or a new understanding of the identity or of knowledge, they said knowledge is to know your enemy. And that's what raised the question for the identity. So to know your enemy, and to then you need to start with building yourself and and not believe in your enemy, not believe their claims, and to know that it is your human and religious commitment to stand up to that enemy. In terms of the lessons learned from the Ansarullah movement, I'm trying to be brief here. Ansarullah, of course, now, as my colleagues have mentioned in the previous papers, after the 21st of September, which was a revolution that the international community or the West did not allow to reach its full capacity and full potential, because a war was waged against it 5 years into it. In January 2001, they started their movement, and 3 years only afterwards, the war against them started. So they were not given enough time for the founder or the project manager now, or leaders, for this project to materialize and see daylight, and for people to experience this project. But they realized that in 5 months only after the revolution, with all the successes they have achieved, they needed to be stopped. So now they represent most of the Yemeni people and their ambitions in getting rid of affiliation and dependency on Saudi Arabia and the US. They need to learn from lessons from the past. The disadvantages or the setbacks that the former regime, as well as the Muslim Brotherhood, fell into, have to be learned and taken into consideration by Ansarullah, because they follow a Quranic methodology and a Quranic approach, which indicates always that you have to go back to the past and learn from it. There is a verse that says you should go around the world and look what happened to former people and learn from them. And this indicates that we need to learn from the past. But unfortunately, the only lesson the Arabs and Muslims have learned from the past is not to acknowledge the past altogether. But Ansarullah, who, if they want to be responsive to the ambitions of the majority of the Yemeni people, they need to learn from the mistakes of the former regime in their unilateral and regional approach, for example, and other authoritarian methods, because the former or the previous regime dealt with the Yemeni society by creating conflicts among the components of the Yemeni community. He called it, the former president, that he was tying the heads of different serpents or snakes, and he would incite strife between tribes and between communities, and that delayed development for years. And ruling, the governance was based on the right man in the right place, but the right here being having the right affiliation, the right tribal affiliation, the right region, the right family. That was the parameter. That's for the former regime. And as for the Muslim Brotherhood, or the experience of the Islah government, whether when they shared power with the previous regime or afterwards when they took power, their appointment was based on trust rather than competence. But God says that you have to ask an expert, and the Ahl al-Dhikr, who are the scholars. So this idea of specialization needs to be taken into consideration, and Ansarullah have to learn from those past lessons, because if we follow the same path, we should expect the same outcomes. If they follow the same track as Hizb al-Islah and the former regime, they would be toppled just in the same way. And we have to understand that the Saudi aggression may make the supporters of Ansarullah disregard some of the violations committed on the different battlefields, but after the aggression, all the monitoring and all the eyes would scrutinize those violations, particularly for the good of the Yemeni people who have put their faith and trust in the Ansarullah movement. The final part, or the third part, as I said, many of the criticisms were ideologized and not objective. For example, I will go through three studies that tried to study the future of Ansarullah, but their study was not objective, or their motivation was not objective, but it was more or less wishful thinking, and they expressed what they wished for. One of those studies says that it is a military madhab-based movement that is not going to be over or be eliminated, but it's not going at the same time to expand beyond Sada and its surroundings. This study was in 2011, and reality now flies in the face of those who made this study. Another study confirms that the Houthis do not want to expand in their regional surroundings in any way, but it's clear that they have established themselves as an entity that is hard to disregard, that imposed itself quite strongly, and that's quite clear now. And again, in another study in 2008, they said that there would be a promising future for the Houthis, and that it is expected for this movement to become an influential player in the political arena, and it would be looked upon as an example of sacrifice for national issues. And as I mentioned, Ahmed al-Dawshi was one of the most prolific writers about the Houthis, and he talked about its future and its education, etc. But because of his ideological background, his studies was not quite objective, but based on the wishes of its adversaries, basically, and he predicted that there would be no future for this movement. It was published in Qatar, and he said that as long as Ansarullah take up arm and follow a conceptual framework that gives itself a divine right to power, and unless they define their position from armament, they will have no future. And he said that their future was blurred and unclear, by which he meant that it would have no future whatsoever, but reality proved him wrong. Now, if we want to see the future of any movement, we have to understand the strengths and advantages of this movement to build upon, and to understand the disadvantages or setbacks in order to overcome them or address them. So if we are to evaluate Ansarullah, this movement that could stand up to a state that is backed by the United States and by Saudi Arabia and by others that engaged even sometimes directly in the sixth war against them, with more than 6,000 airstrikes, they were able to stand up to it and renew their forces and persist, because, as I mentioned, it is a movement that is from the ranks of the community. It has a project, a vision, and a leadership, and it has a clear and genuine enemy, external enemy, which it confronts and fights. So the indicators that show that there is a future for Ansarullah is that it was able to stand up for this aggression by 7 states, and was able to establish self-sufficiency in armament and make arms themselves. And despite all the accusations that it is armed by Iran, this is proven wrong by reality, because if they can't put their wounded or send their wounded for treatment abroad, they cannot get armament from abroad. So they have been able to develop themselves, to persist and develop their own armament and create and reach self-sufficiency and to reach a certain economic achievement as well as in economic terms. They were able to stop the inflation and the depreciation as opposed to the dollar. Another advantage is the presence of a unified single leadership for Ansarullah movement, and in those advantages it surpasses all other political parties and movements and gives it a lot of advantages such as on the political level, and I would like to say that this leadership is rather independent from Saudi Arabia and from Iran. To quote a book by Al-Jallul about Yemen, he talked about the former regime. He said that the formation of the government was known in Riyadh before it's declared in the Yemeni capital, and some people would sleep as ministers and wake up stripped of that title. And although they have a relation with Iran, but it is an alliance rather than an organic relation as opposed to Hezbollah, because the ideological foundations for Ansarullah is different from the Ithnay Ashariya. And although they this affiliation or loyalty to Iran gives it some room for maneuver, because they are free of affiliation and they are allied with Iran, and this depiction of an affiliation with Iran is only a description from outside, and they are not ashamed of confronting colonization, and Ansarullah actually does not deny that relation with Iran. As I mentioned before, there is a vision for Ansarullah for a modern Yemeni state in their political vision. In terms of the future of the movement, they have to differentiate between the religious text and the understanding of that text. So religion is one thing and the religious thought is another. So if the movement is able to differentiate between those two aspects, and that one is the understanding of the people, which differs from time to time and from place to place, and interests, and with the difference of interests, then the movement would be able to express or reflect the ambitions and expectations of the majority of the Yemeni people, because it is a movement that was able to overcome those that monopolized the power in Yemen, and was able to accommodate for all Yemeni components. Unlike other factions under whose control no element from Ansarullah can be present. On the contrary, there is much coexistence in Ansarullah areas, and a peace and partnership agreement has to be built upon, and it has to be used to build upon for a political future. At the end, I would like to say that Ansarullah has offered a model for vulnerable and weak peoples, and that's why the United States is fighting this movement quite strongly. In other words, this movement that was able to stand up to Kalashnikov, F-16s and other modern weaponry has offered a role model for resistance in Palestine and elsewhere, because this is not a strength versus weakness, this is an issue of faith. So if you have the Quran, you have the true weapon and you have the true upper hand. And if you have your notion of a nation, of an ummah, you have your faith, you will be able to overcome your enemy and reach to victory. The United States will spare no power, but it failed
بين السعودية وبين الولايات المتحدة الأمريكية لأنها
between Saudi Arabia and the United States. The Ansarullah al-Houthis have proven that those arms and advanced weaponry have failed. Thank you so much for what you have offered in your presentation, including lessons learned. In your presentation, he mentioned that Ansarullah al-Houthi have been subject to much deformation and defamation because they considered it a political movement that is an extension of the Shia Imami movement in Yemen. With the advent of Shia spread in this region, and they said that they considered the Sunnis as enemies that cannot coexist with it. But actually, Ansarullah al-Houthi is a project that is cross-confessional, cross-madhhab, and away from all sects and sectarian affiliation, and that all of this criticism was applied to all madhhabs that take us away from Quran, which is at the heart of this project. Actually, the Houthis themselves, he said, are very much different and differ and disagree with the idea of the Ithnai Ashariya, and they don't acknowledge the idea of the missing Imam or the awaited Mahdi. And then he said that he wanted to define the Ansarullah al-Houthi movement, that it is not an abstract idea, but a social movement and a political movement that emerged in a divisive environment, and one that is rampant with vertical and horizontal contradictions because of the failure of the emergence of a nation state that creates a national identity in which all sub-identities melt and coexist. And then he said this project was mainly ideological, social, and cultural, but it has its religious foundation. Its features, first of all, is that it is a human project, making the human at its heart, and raising its awareness and enlightening the human beings through the Quran was their main objective. The second point was that it is an enlightening project that tries to uplift the ideas and the ideology of the Muslim individual, to offer the civilizational model that is worthy of them. And it's also a reformist project that tries to reform society using Quranic discourse and Quranic culture as a pivotal point of reference. And finally, it's also an awakening and developmental project that tries to create development and awakening at all levels. So this will to awaken the nation was the most important idea that prevailed in this thought, and it tried to uplift the ummah and to take it away from its current vulnerability and backwardness.
الأعداء التاريخيين للعرب والمسلمين نظرة شاملة وموضوعية وأساسية، وهي جزء من
This project looks at the enemies of the Arabs and the Muslims, a comprehensive look from this point of view. In terms of lessons, the speaker said that there are a number of lessons that you need to know, lessons of the past, and they are in the Yemeni context. He believes that all of these lessons, whether from the movement or from the former regime or from all of their enemies, all of these things should signs or lessons of history, and he said that the Ansarullah movement should learn from these lessons, including the lessons that are learned from its adversary. And he says that the wars can provide extension or expansion of this movement, and that the past years can be the dire years of the past can be useful, and that this experience in running the country was very useful, because the former regime was working on a striking balance between the society components by replacing one component with the other, and the learning from not getting or giving positions to people who belong to the party, or people who belong to a certain community, and that they should benefit from the war, that wanted to make people who belong to the movement look away from the war, especially those who are newly belonging to the movement, which means that they want to benefit or to find opportunities for those who are looking for opportunities or gains for themselves. He also said that we need to know the strengths of the movement, build on them, and strengthen these strength points. And he mentioned in this field how to make use of the war and the conditions that were present for the movement. That way they learned a lot from, and how they made their decisions swiftly, and they were able to implement these decisions without having wings or different wings in the movement. And in terms of the relation between Iran and the Ansarullah, that this is an alliance and not an organic relation, just as the case of Lebanon, and this is something that should be taken into consideration. As for the political issue, he said that there should be that they should build with the other parties, because they are countrymen of the same homeland. And in terms of the authority, he said that they would manage to include all the parties of the Yemeni community. And then he talked about the difference between religion and the religious ideology. He said that the religion is or its sources are from Allah, from the Almighty, whereas the understanding of religion is the interpretation, and both issues should be differentiated, because the religion is fixed, but the understanding of religion is changing. And the Ansarullah provided an example for even if this experience is limited and a humble one in the face of the invading or aggressive countries, but they managed to, or succeeded to confront them. Thank you very much, Dr. Fathiya, Mr. Anas, Mr. Arafat, and Mr. Abdul Rahman. And now we will move to Tunisia, and we will listen to Dr. Al-Hudayli Al-Mansur to provide his comment on these papers. The floor is yours. Mr. Sami, do you hear me? I hear you well. Go ahead. Thank you, Dr. Sami, for this opportunity. And I would like to thank the speakers and the colleagues from Yemen who provided useful papers for those who want to learn about the Yemeni situation in general, and to learn about this new phenomenon, relatively new, Ansarullah movement. In general, the approach of the strategist and the analyst's way things are related to a phenomenon is that they provide their introductions and their theoretical perceptions on that phenomenon, and that's where they make the mistake in understanding the reality, and they fail in monitoring this issue and the potential of this issue, and that's what is happening in relation to Ansarullah movement. Today, there was a plane in the Sana'a airplane, which means that the strategic and media approaches and the different analysis of this phenomenon, these approaches seems that they are not correct, and they are completely wrong. First, I need to mention that the Yemenis made the way of speaking make it a nightmare for the interpreter, because there is a kind of energy with the Yemenis, and they believe that the more or the longer they speak, the more successful they will be in convincing. This is possible sometimes, and sometimes we can summarize what we want to say, and the impact will be more influential and more effective. So the Ansarullah movement seems that they have excessive energy, and the problem of energy is a problematic one, because this is something that is required, but we need to monitor that energy and direct it in appropriately. I have some comments on Ansarullah based on what I've heard from the speakers. Dr. Fathia talked about Hussein Badr al-Houthi, and that his terms of reference is Quran when he talks about the Jews and the Christians and the Muslims. I believe that, of course, we look highly to the Quran, but what is happening on the ground is not what you are saying. Now you are fighting with Muslims, and you are supported by Christians. Areas that are under control of France, these areas are under the control of Christians. So this categorization is out of history, is something from the old history. Now the world is being organized in a different way. There are tyrannical and imperialist countries, and there are liberation movements. And in these liberation movements, you might be supported by the Christian, the Jew, or the Buddhist, and you may be betrayed by and killed and slaughtered by your brother in religion, so to speak. In terms of the Quranic identity, it is nice to have a Quranic identity, and since the 1950s, in the Arab and Islamic landscape, there were some people who talked about the Quranic identity, and some people said that the Quran is the solution. But for the people, things are different, because your identity for those people is not where you get that identity from. The genuine identity that will be take root is, where do you take those people? Are you going to make them more happy or happier? Are you going to take them into a more organized situation, or you are going to keep them in the problems that they are suffering from? I was waiting from the speaker who talked about the relations with Iran. Of course, I have an idea about these relations, but in general, who listens to this intervention in this field, of course, they will wait from the speaker some details in this issue. And I don't think that it is a strength or a positive point for Ansarullah movement to have a relation with the Iranians. Anyway, the Iranians don't leave their allies, and they are creating in the region strong alliances with the Lebanese and with the Palestinians and others. So it's not enough to learn that. Now we are trying to summarize and understand the Ansarullah movement. Part of this is a personal analysis because I followed this movement, and part of it is according to what I heard. The first point, Ansarullah, is a new Arabism project based on that the conflict in the past years or in the past decades is between two neighboring geography. We have the geography that is occupied by Saudi Arabia and the geography of Yemen. In the measures of history, there is an old difference or disputes about the origin of Arabism between the Yemenis and the Saudis, and we see as if this conflict or dispute is getting back since since Jamal Abdel Nasser left, may he rest in peace. Who raised the flag of Arabism. After that, Arabism turned to Saudi Arabia, which means that Saudi Arabia became the guidance of the Arab policies and the influential one in these policies, and he speaks on behalf of the Arabs. There were, of course, some criticism from Iraq, Palestine, Syria, Lebanon, Algeria, and others, but the criticism or the resistance from Yemen was the strongest and the most effective, and that explains a little bit the gamble that Saudi Arabia has taken to get involved in a war in Yemen, which proved to be a strategic, a huge strategic problem. But they don't have any other option but to siege Ansarullah movement, because this movement is targeting the centrality of Saudi Arabia and its centrality in the hegemonical system. Of course, this hegemony that is used by the United States is using two tools, the Zionist and Saudi Arabia, dealing at the same time with other agents. So the movement of Ansarullah is being monitored by the Zionists and by the United States. What is happening in Yemen is strategic, and the Ansarullah know that they are at the heart of a strategic battle. It is a long battle, and with the ramifications, maybe Ansarullah today are about to get out of the, or to finish the direct military battle, but this will put them face to face with other type of battles, and this battle might be more dangerous. The second point is the strength of the dream. I mentioned or talked about the energy of the Yemenis, and it is an extraordinary energy. Abdul Malik al-Houthi, in some of his speeches, he speaks for 2 or 3 and sometimes 4 hours. So he enjoys a lot of energy. In Yemen, there is an explosion or a flow or a flood of energy. And people who are oppressed, they will have this explosion, but they need to guide this energy in their discourse, in their tone, and in their courageousness in the field and in their demonstrations. So this energy, we can say that they are getting it. We can talk about a model that they are getting this energy from the belief, from the doctrine that they have, and it's also from the cracking down and the oppression that they have suffered from for decades. What we see today from Ansarullah was kept within them for decades. Maybe this is also linked with the grievance they have that is related to the house of Muhammad or Al-Bayt. We have Badr al-Din al-Houthi, who is the terms of reference, one of the greatest terms of reference of the Zaydi. He is a scholar, a struggler, and one of the ulama, and he he was one of the builders of a vision. Then Badr al-Din al-Houthi becomes a second point that is related to Badr al-Din al-Houthi, or another aspect, which is he is a speaker and orator and an organizer and a planner. In addition to Abd al-Malik al-Houthi, the military leader. Of course, the Yemenis and Ansarullah do not suffice with this, and they want to have a wider influence, which is the Muslim Ummah or the humanity at large. One last point that needs to be transformed or conversed. The doctrine is good. It builds the self. It builds enthusiasm. But people who belong to a certain doctrine, usually they are conservative. And what is required from Ansarullah is to go beyond this conservative nature and their doctrine to translate the content of their doctrine in a language that others can understand. What they have achieved so far, and until now, is miraculous in their eyes or in the eyes of their adversaries. But what their slogan is, the cry. This cry should be transformed into words. This energy, the Yemeni energy that I talked about, the sharp energy, should be translated into words and to build a new tongue for these words, and to make sure that this tongue can interact with people inside and outside Yemen. And by saying the tongue, I don't mean only the language or the cultural or artistic
ولا نريد صحوا هذه الأحلام، بينما الواقع والأبلغ في السياسة وإدارة الشأن العام هي الأبلغ.
Without the dream, and sometimes we feel more realistic and public waking up, and not to the point of dreaming. I believe that I'm one of the people that I believe that dreams can have a lot of spirit, a lot of belief, and at the same time, I believe that the largest challenge is to change this moral energy into a quantified element. We need to understand that Yemen is a neighbor of a country that is saturated with the huge numbers of underground energy, weapon, and a lot of other things. For example, as I monitored the launch of Hezbollah in Lebanon, I believe that Ansarullah is very similar to Hezbollah launch Hezbollah in its early years. We don't know whether this movement will achieve what Hezbollah achieved on different levels or in different dimensions. Anyway, it seems that in its youth and even in its childhood, it will face a lot of challenges. And I hope that it will provide all the good things for the Muslim and Arab Ummah. Thank you very much. Thank you, Dr. Al-Huzayli, for this in-depth and objective participation and intervention. Now, we will move to Dr. Ba'aziz Al-Faqi as the second commentator, and he is a well-known teacher in the faculty of Sharia. Do you hear me well? We do. In the name of God, all the praise and the blessings be upon the Messenger of Allah. Thank you very much, Dr. Sami Al-Aryan and the SIGA for this invitation and for giving me this opportunity to comment on this important topic. Actually, I want to make my comments limited to two main topics, and I don't claim that I will cover everything that was mentioned in the papers. I will just try to select a few points, taking into consideration the time, and to provide a clear image. Actually, the first thing that we can see in the papers that are presented was that there is a kind of falling or failing in understanding the notion of a state. And I tried to focus in these papers that are presented how these papers understood the issue or the concept of a state. It might be understood, taken into consideration, Ansarullah movement or the beginning of Ansarullah movement, because it is because it started from a religious background, and when things happen in such a way, there is some conflicting between the state and the
المعاصرة المعروفة التي ندركها جميعا. أول هذه الأركان هو ركن الشعب، شعب الدولة، وثانيها هو ركن السلطة.
And we have two pillars for that. The first is the people, and the second is the authority, and the third is the region for any state to function well. These are three points. From what I've seen from these papers, I see that they agree only on the back or the terms of reference that are based on the lectures of Hussein al-Houthi, and then putting a theoretical and conceptual terms of reference of these lectures, and this is an oversimplification of this concept. Because when we speak about the state, we should take into consideration a number of cultural, political, and social and ideological points of view, and the complication and the regional environments. We should take into consideration a lot of concepts that no country in the world can stand without answering these questions, like the question of citizenship. Where is the value of citizenship in the thought of Ansarullah group? How do they look at citizenship? What is the impact of religion on the citizenship, and the impact of religion on the rights and duties of the people, of the citizens? Answering these questions will allow to understand to what extent Ansarullah comprehend the issue of the state. And I believe the lack of this understanding has to do or is related to the fact that when Ansarullah got control of the authority in Sana'a, it was a surprise to everybody. Nobody expected this to happen, which led them to take control over the authority. And it seems that after they were in control in Sana'a, they were confused how to deal with this authority. And here, or this leads me to important concepts upon which the modern state are built on, and we find that these issues are completely absent in the addresses of Ansarullah to these issues. And this is maybe relevant to the enthusiasm. The enthusiasm that is moving Ansarullah movement should lead the country. Of course, countries or states are not led by the energy or enthusiasm without wisdom, without understanding, and without learning from the lessons of others. And if states are managed only by the enthusiasm and energy, we will see a lot of failure in other countries. So I call on Ansarullah movement to revisit their understanding of the state, and they should expand their terms of reference in terms of politics, religion, and society rather than what we hear in these papers. This is the first paper that I wanted to comment on. The second point, very briefly, I want to raise a number of questions. Since we are talking about a political project and a model for a state, there are serious questions that require to be answered. Now, the Ansarullah movement, after they come into power in Sana'a, they faced a reality. This reality cannot be answered through broad lines or pure general answers that are not convincing to the others. You should convince others that you are ruling or that you are negotiating with. So these answers should be provided. Well, the first question is, what is the concept of the Quranic theory that Ansarullah are talking about to lead or to manage the state? We need to have interpretation of this Quranic theory. This is a very general idea and very simple and superficial one without any interpretation of this project. For example, is it based on, if it's based on that this is an enemy and this is an agent and this is a proxy and it's on the war of, or on the idea of war or on applying jihad, which is only about the violent fighting without any other understanding. This is not, I believe, that this or Ansarullah always use this trick to cover their practices with this issue or with the Quranic theory in order not to be criticized by the others, because it shows that they are combining the spirit of Quran with their political project. And this is not correct, because the Quran as a spirit, especially in the legislative nature, and I agree with Dr. Sami and Dr. Al-Munsar or Al-Mansar that the Quran didn't provide detailed answers for managing the state. It provided a number of principles, general higher values. And afterwards, it's left to the people in every space, every place and time to put the details. That's why we find the system of ruling and the Sharia policy or politics are set in broad lines. For example, Allah ordained people with the justice and fair dealing with people without details. But when we talk about the systems, we find some monarchy here or a republic there or a different system here or there, and there are some states that are based on the secular terms of reference, others religious terms of reference, and we have other countries that have lots of details about the rights and duties of citizens or the human rights in their constitution. We have a lot of terms of reference that are related to the concept of the state. So when you corner others and you say this is the Quranic theory, it shows that this is a kind of hiding or trying to circumvent the idea or circumventing the criticism that can be provided to this experience. This is the first thing. Two, the idea of freedom and the rights. These are some of the concepts that are not well addressed by Ansarullah. they are presented in a very brief way. In reality, if you want to build a state, you should put a system for those rights. If you want others to deal with you comfortably, you need to provide a system for these rights. But the practices that we have in their practice of the authority, they didn't give or pay any heed for the rights of the people. Anything that talks about the rights of people was criminalized. Displaced the children, they displaced people, they kidnapped people from their homes and they destroyed houses. So it's very normal for people to be displaced or to flee this country because they fled this political project. Because this project says that you are either with us or against us. You can't give me these two options. I'm either with you or against you.
That's
this is
not acceptable.
Appropriate.
Guarantee
so you have
my
to provide
freedom, guarantee
the rights.
my right, and then you and I would live within the framework and in this state, in the framework of this state under an equal footing of rights and obligations. This is one of the most difficult questions that need to be addressed. You cannot just say that the Constitution guarantees freedoms and rights. That's not enough. Most constitutions around the world stipulate a full system of values and rights and freedoms, and they are called the charters of freedom and rights. And they, Ansarullah, may take a look at this and benefit from it. And the third point, which actually seems to be central to the Shia vision of political governance, which is the relation between political leadership and religious leadership, the authority. That is, you as a movement or as a group, it's not a problem that you have your spiritual or religious leadership. That's not a problem. But when you take power in a certain state, you must separate your religious and spiritual leaders from affecting the political institutions of the state, because the spiritual leadership is for your ideology, for your group of thought, while the political leadership is a point of governance or an apparatus of governance to govern a group of people, the citizens, who are originally and are supposed to be a non-homogeneous people, a non-homogeneous group. That's the idea of people governed by states. In Ansarullah, you have come to this predicament, the predicament of what is the limit across which the spiritual and religious leadership cannot cross into the political sphere unless this is resolved. This predicament is going to persist and it's not going to be successful. If we presume that the political agencies in Sana'a take particular decisions for practical, pragmatic reasons, but their spiritual leaders in the Houthis say otherwise, which one would prevail? They might coordinate beforehand, but that is not going to work. And many countries, such as Sudan, is a good example or a case in point for ideas, for the idea of a religious background for governance that it falls at the end of the day. So we have this spiritual leadership in Sudan, which is the Islamic Front, and there is the government headed by Omar al-Bashir. But what happened during, by the end of this governance, there was a division until the point where the regime altogether fell. So the Houthis now are required to answer to those questions. What is the relation between the spiritual leadership and the political leadership, and to what extent can this affect the state? If they have a direct influence on the state, then we are not talking about a modern state in the modern understanding of a state. Now, to finalize my intervention briefly, I would like to offer a piece of advice. Grievances do not build states, nor do they build a political project. Grievances build no state or political projects, and targeting opponents to your ideas cannot be the basis of building a life project for the future. Ansarullah has to review its approach. They have many ideological mistakes, many structural mistakes, and many political mistakes, and they have to exercise self-critique based on the accommodation of others, on national unity, and on isolating political affairs from the spiritual and religious affairs. All practices related to the confiscation of property, the child soldiers, the oppression of women have to be stopped, because those are unsound state practices. They believe that the whole world are their enemies, but actually they are not, because your practices run against the modern values of this world. That's why they oppose your governance. I believe that Ansarullah has no future within the foreseeable future and transformations in the reality, and I expect that their influence would decline and their power would decline to its pre-September coup status, because all indications show that there would be a transformation in the political scene in Yemen on all levels. Hence, they need to review all of these issues wisely and with insight, and not only criticize the others and accuse them of betrayal, treason, being agents. Those are Yemeni citizens just like you, and have the right to live in their state and to practice their constitutional and political right of contributing to the outlining of their own future. Thank you so much for giving me this opportunity, and I hope that this comment and this intervention has been beneficial. Thank you so much. God bless you. Peace be upon you. Thank you so much, Dr. Ba'aziz Al-Faqih, who is a former dean in the legal school in the Open Arab University and another university in Sudan, and he also has many publications, researches, and articles. Thank you so much, everyone. Now we go back to our main speakers to respond to those comments or to give any final remarks, because we have taken a long time, so I will restrict, please, each speaker to just 5 minutes. We start with Dr. Fathiya. It seems that we have lost our connection to Sana'a. No speaker is available from Sana'a. I don't know why. They were just here. I have just received a message. They said they had a technical problem. I don't know if they are going to be able to come back to rejoin this session. Actually, we have our time has already expired anyway, but tomorrow we're going to have 2 sessions on the Islah party, the Reform party. It's going to start at 11 a.m. Istanbul time for the first session, and the second session would also be on, both sessions will also be on Yemen. We thank all of our speakers today, Dr. Fathiya, Dr. Al-Qadi, Dr. Rafat Al-Rumayma, Rafat Al-Mansur, Dr. Ba'aziz Al-Faqih. Thank you all. Thanks for all the participants and attendees and all of those symposia and interventions comments are going to be available on our link on our YouTube page, SIGA. We have now 100 hours of those symposia. Tomorrow we will have finished 100 hours of this study of Islamic movements. I hope to see you soon. Peace be